Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Sunday, May 7th, 2017 edition of VR News. Going to start with a simulator, not a flight or a driving simulator, but a bartender simulator. It calls itself Flair Tender. And there's generally a couple of types of bartenders. You've got the flashy 1988 Tom Cruise cocktail style bartenders, and then you've pretty much got all the rest. But in common, bartenders, you know, they can be equal parts confidant, therapist, hell, even priest, social worker. There's a lot of things that bartenders do in their role as a bartender, and there's a lot of knowledge with the stronger bartenders. I mean, it is not uncommon. There's bartenders out there that have 1,000+ drinks in their head that just a name has to be produced. They will be able to create that, which is pretty damn impressive. I put that right up there like learning to be a cabbie in London, which takes years because of the lack of numbers, names on all the streets. It's a very intense learning curve. There's so much to being just a cabbie there. Same thing with bartending. You know, if you're in a small, you know, not very plush kind of bar, yeah, I could see, you know, people mostly ordering the common stuff. But even there, they're probably going to be in the dozens, if not low hundreds, of drinks that they know how to make. So where does Flair Tender come in? Well, it looks a lot on the surface like Counterfight. Counterfight being the one where you are the ramen soup proprietor. You're also making teas for customer, kind of like a reverse Tapper. If you know of the arcade game Tapper, drinks are coming at you conveyor belt style, down lines, and you've got to be quick and get to each of those orders. This is kind of the reverse of that in the Counterfight, in that you are serving customers. This kind of borrows from that look and that feel. It aesthetically looks very close to Counterfight, but you're producing the drinks and you're doing it without the flair of, say, a cocktail. It's more about the mix and how you get it right. So it looks pretty neat if that's your thing. Yeah, I don't know. I like Counterfight. I played that. Would I spend some time with Flair Tender? Sure, if it was cheap. Good price and fun to play. That remains to be seen. Wasn't able to determine that because it was hands-off just looking at it. But definitely one I will follow up on. It's going to be available in early access later this month for both Vive and Rift. And then the next story, Star Wars Battlefront II again. We've heard the rumors about PlayStation VR content. Well, now we have another piece of evidence. I haven't seen any proof of this, but let's assume and take it at face value. The evidence is according to a Danish user of NeoGAF. He basically saw a recent newsletter from PlayStation that included a thumbnail for a story for Battlefront 2 that used the PlayStation VR compatible logo. It's since been removed. It may have been a screw up at Sony, or it could indeed be pointing to the fact that there will be PlayStation VR support. Now, if it supports the game in its entirety, that's going to be a game changer for Sony VR. I think that will be huge. I'm not expecting it to be. I'm expecting it to be more of a limited in scope type thing. But man, if they are in fact making it full VR as an option, that's going to be pretty damn good. Pretty damn impressive. Next up, just on the topic of Sony. This was an article on Upload VR asking the question, does Sony's PlayStation VR need an upgrade? We haven't seen a lot. Compare that to the desktop HMDs. So with Rift, you've had the touch. You've had the addition of room scale. You've had the third sensor and all the work around that. With the Vive, you've had TP-Cast, the deluxe audio strap. I mean, there's a few there. The beauty of the Vive editions are that devs don't need to change anything or worry about an attachment rate. It's business as usual. Whether the user wants to use TPcast and go wireless or wired, that's up to them. The developer doesn't have to change the game experience. Whereas the upgrades for Rift, there is an adoption and attachment rate to that. They're not at 1-to-1. It's pretty high. There's a lot of touch users out there, but it's a consideration for the dev. Now, on the PlayStation side of things, it's kind of that already, in the sense that you've got 1 million plus VR units out there, but you've got 50 million plus consoles out there. So convincing devs, it's a little bit more of an uphill task for the PlayStation VR. But upgrade-wise, I don't think they need to go in that. I think they need to focus on content, because doing room scale right now and doing it well would require just a major overhaul. And part of the strategy with PlayStation VR was the fact that a lot of people already had cameras, they already had the controllers, and that's why you got the two bundles. You got the base one that assumes people have the stuff already, the peripherals, and then the all-included for those who just have the PlayStation console. So yeah, personally, I hope they just focus on content, do the upgrade in a couple of years' time, and then do it properly. But for now, I don't think it's needed. How about you guys? Would you like to see some stuff upgraded? Because my feeling, like I said, do standing, where you take a step to either side. PlayStation can handle that. Do seated. It can absolutely handle that. And focus on those. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that, guys. Next news piece, why the 360-degree film industry is in the midst of a reboot. The first part of this on Road to VR came out yesterday, so I waited for part 2. Part 1 concerns itself with the technology, part 2 with the workforce, the people behind it. And it's just a really good article because it talks about how little has actually changed. So they're discussing with people who have done 360-degree filming, you know, for the last 2, 3, 4 years. The technology really hasn't changed. It's just been a brute force approach. Throw more cameras on it. Throw faster software algorithms for stitching the stuff together. 2, 3 years ago, you know, there was a real challenge in finding people who had the experience working with 360. Now it's not market saturation, but it's at the point it's not that difficult. So, you know, certain costs have come down development-wise, but the quality of the hardware, that's kind of where the concern is for a lot of these 360-degree devs. You're just seeing lots of lenses being thrown at it, but the quality of the cameras themselves really hasn't improved. And you're not seeing huge differences, you know, price-wise you are, but tech-wise between the low entry level and the higher-end professional, just more as opposed to better. So yeah, interesting. And then the, like I said, the HR side is more about the costs, how a lot of those costs have just come down because there's a lot more people doing it. But the stitching, for example, 8,000 to 20,000 per minute for a final product. So a 5-minute film could cost 40 to 100,000 and took about a week per minute to complete. So yeah, brute force definitely helped stitching, but there's probably work that can be done on better algorithms, better ways of the software working with better technology. And I think that's the point the article's trying to make. Next story, guys, deals with Xchimp, a VR headset that promises all-in-one mobile VR at a low cost. So, not going to get into the whole Kickstarter. I've beaten that to death. I'll have a link if you want to know my opinions on that. Most of you know that already. Let's just take this at face value. They fund it. All right, so what are they offering? Well, according to them, and this company is out of Germany, I believe, or Austria, sorry. They want to fill the niche between mobile and desktop/console. But when you look at the specs, I would say no, they haven't done that. In some ways, I actually think they're behind mobile because the mobile solutions have good GPUs. They're proposing an Intel Atom X5 processor, which I don't think is a workhorse strong enough to do decent, good VR on this, even at the low refresh rate of 60 hertz. Now, they say they're 30% less weight, but then they talk about a 100-degree field of view. The only spec that looked nice to me was the QHD visual, the 2560 by 1440 pixels. I'm hoping that's per eye. They didn't specify that. I'm going to dig a little deeper on that. They've got a nice battery life. It's 7 hours. But yeah, I don't see it surpassing mobile or Qualcomm, which I put a little ahead of mobile. I agree on the premise that the niche is there. I just don't see this as delivering, you know, what their target was. So next and last story, guys, the future of Facebook Spaces. This was nice to hear from Mike Booth. He's the Facebook social VR product manager, and he talks about what's next. And you know, with the future of the app. He said, we're putting Spaces out because there's some interesting things to do, but we have a lot of things we want to do in the future. One of the things that we're thinking about is what Mark talked about, which is the people-centric computing platform. So in this case, I want to hang out with my friend Rachel. We meet up in VR. We are there in that space. We decide to play pool. Instead of launching into a separate app, we bring the pool table in. The next example is music. Well, now you bring your streaming app into the social VR experience. So it gives you a snapshot of what they're planning on doing. It's not necessarily about walking around a world or a huge environment. It's about bringing things into, literally, as they call the app, spaces. Whether it's music, activities. Now, right now, you can make paper hats and do crayon drawing. He admits himself that gets old really quick. So the second part of their plan is to throw Spaces out to third-party developers and have them kind of continue a lot of that development. So I think that's a great idea. I like that direction. And I've talked about, you know, giving social VR myself a really good try. When I finish this move, I'm going to do exactly that because it's pitiful. To date, I've spent maybe minutes, probably under 15 minutes in social VR apps, and I got to spend more time in, you know, before I come to the conclusion it's not for me. So there you go. All right, guys, that is it for the news on this Sunday. Tomorrow is the start of a crazy hectic week. Movers Wednesday, boxes to pack, garage sales to have, Craigslist people to barter canned food with. Can't wait to get started. Cheers, guys.